And the only way we can evolve as a species is if we are all daring enough to evolve as individuals. This means really allowing ourselves to face terrifying things, that there is no great beauty without corresponding ugliness, that the animal and human nature of things is such that we cannot contain it in easy cliche, in sentimental stanzas, in outmoded structures. And those structures include, how we think about addiction, how we think about religion, how we think about our place in the universe, how we think about each other, how we think about dominance and gender relations and race relations and interpersonal relations. And we see it, the repression of it is starting to give way. There are cracks forming at the edges of our assumed roles. And we are all having difficulty with it, and there's no way we're going to find our way through it unless we are really willing to look at the world in a sort of a sober and realistic way. And that means abandoning some long-held, long-beloved beliefs.
Wow, that's deep. I mean, where's the dick jokes in that? I don't know. I'm kidding. No. So, wow. That was so... Man, there's just so much there to wrap your head around.
Go ahead, unpack it as much as you like. Let me know what you want to know. Because and that you say that, and then now you're trying to pick at it, is exactly the kind of thing we're dealing with.
Yeah.
The fact is, all of these ideas are tightly knotted, and we cannot possibly just look at them and unravel them and be fine. We have to slowly pull apart the tiny threads and tease out the little ideas and find out where we've been assuming things that we didn't even know we were assuming.
Sure.
So it's complicated.
One might say awful.
Okay. Yes.
There we go. That'll help. Okay. No, so I guess... Gosh, I'm gonna try and work my way back to a deeper question about this stuff. But one thing that I find interesting, and I wanted to make sure that we dealt with it, was that as somebody who, you are a avowed atheist, and just want to know, since you dealt with sobriety, trying to fight out of being addicted to pot, then. I'm in a 12-step for a different issue, and that's very similar. They follow the steps of the AA thing, and I'll just say what it is so people don't really think it's something freaky. It's Debtors Anonymous for medical bills.
It's Podcasters Anonymous.
Basically, I didn't want people going, wait, so is this sex with animals anonymous? No. But anyway, so the thing is, which would be awful.
Is there a Sex with Animals Anonymous? Because I think my puppy would like to visit that.
Dear God.
Let's just say Carl's got a real monkey on his back. I'll show myself out.
Yes, please do. Anyway, no, but what I was going to say is that they always try to put in all these step programs as the most common way to get sober and all this, or at least it's the most talked about by general society. And, and they make a big deal out of find your higher power. And, people that know me, they know I'm Catholic, so I'm not pushing my view either way. But I'm curious, as somebody who's an atheist, how do you deal with that? Was that important to you at all to find some expression of that?
No. I believe the higher power we all have is our subconscious. Mm-hmm. And I think... And I've said this many times, I am so thoroughly an atheist that when people tell me they believe in God, I don't believe them. It just, awesome. I cannot imagine
God, I almost spat that up. Anyway.
I cannot imagine how anyone can look at what seems to me an obvious fairy tale and say, well, I'm going to base my life on that. At the same time, I am aware that every religion, and it applies to my own atheism as well, because I don't believe in any of that, and I think it's ridiculous that anyone does. I genuinely think it's silly. But every religion says, well, we're the right one, and everyone else is silly.
Sure.
There's a sort of a tribalism about it.
Absolutely.
And that happens with the 12 steps as well. And the 12-step programs, studies show, are exactly as successful in solving addiction problems as any other rehab program. I think it's as low as 5 or 7%. It might be 12% success rate. But the people who aren't successful don't talk about the 12-step program because it didn't work for them, and they're ashamed of who they are because of the way society treats addiction. And the 12-step programs only talk about their success because that's how you get people in, just as any group does, because they're tribal and evangelical in one way or another.
Sort of an us versus them mentality.
Exactly right. And you should come join us because we're right, and you should do it because this is the only way. I once heard an interview on Oprah Winfrey with the woman whose name I'm blanking on, the woman who wrote "You'll Never Eat Lunch in This Town Again."
Julia Phillips.
Thank you. She was on Oprah Winfrey, and she was talking about how she was an ex-cocaine addict. And someone in the audience said, "You can't be. You're in recovery. If you're recovering, you can't be an ex-addict. You're always an addict." She said, "Well, I don't do it anymore, so I think of myself as a former addict." Well, then you're not recovered. Then because their way had to be right, or else
words, man.
And I believe the higher power is in the stories we tell ourselves, and the higher power to whom I am beholden is the best possible version of myself that I have not yet achieved, not yet attained. So I am constantly trying to improve and making mistakes and trying to improve and making mistakes. But I think that the work that I do is of great enough value that I should strive to do it as well as I possibly can. And no, I do not believe there is an invisible man in the sky. I do not believe that the Milky Way galaxy can hear me when I think. I do not believe that the universe has specific intentions for the life of an individual. I don't think any of that makes any sense. I think that we each must listen to our consciences and follow our own guiding principles. And when we find out that our guiding principles have taken us to the wrong place, or when we find out that our conscience misunderstood what it was basing its suggestions on, we have to be ready to teach it anew, because it is interactive. Our brains are interactive. Our minds are interactive. And while they affect us, we affect them. One of the things that came out of martial arts for me is the realization that it is very Western thinking to say, well, I couldn't help it, I was angry. Eastern tradition says we are in control of our emotions, as we are of our bodies. And the training is all about controlling our bodies and our minds and our spirits. And the Western tradition has us utterly irresponsible. It's part of what I disagree with about organized religion, about Christianity and Judaism and the pagan religions. I think the idea of deities is a relinquishing of responsibility for what I think is really an individual mandate toward bettering ourselves in our world.
Is this, in effect, a slam on Flip Wilson and the Geraldine character whose catchphrase was, "The devil made me do it"?
I think, you know what? No, it's not.
When are you going to stop bringing that up?
I know, it's such a hot topic reference.
Well, I got a few hot takes on the Sonny and Cher Variety Hour. If you want to just give me a little time.
If I may interject a brief story, I performed at the New York Public Library at the tribute to George Carlin. And there was a throwaway line in the story that I told about George, in which I talked about, as a child, sitting through interminable hours of the Sonny and Cher show and the Mac Davis When You're Hot comedy hour, because I didn't yet understand that shows had their own politics, and I thought George might show up on any of them, and I couldn't miss the opportunity. And when I came off stage after the show, Steve Martin walked up to me and extended his hand and said, "I wrote for Sonny and Cher." It was such a throwaway that I couldn't figure out why he was saying this to me. "You're Steve Martin. Why are you giving me your early credits?" And And I
Smothers Brothers was too obscure.
I shook his hand, and then he said, "Well done." And I said, "There's an after party. Will you be coming?" And he said, "No." And I said, "Well, can I stay here and suck up to you for a moment?" And he said, "No, I'm leaving." And he walked away. And I later sent him, realized why he was saying that. It took a while for it to register why he was saying that. So I sent him flowers with a note that said, "Dear Mr. Martin, it was a delight to meet you. I'm so sorry I insulted Sonny and Cher. It must have been dreadfully embarrassing to hear me in public taking pot shots at the work that you did at the high point in your career."
Wow. What did he say to that? Anything?
Yeah, no, he does not write back to me.
Well, that is pretty awful on his part as well. So.
I love him dearly, and I wish he would open a door to me, because
Come on.
He's one of my heroes.
Steve, if you're out there, get those happy feet to the nearest post office. Drop Dylan a line.
You know what?
It's not that he hasn't been writing back to you. He's just been picking out a thermos. It's got to be an extraordinary thermos for you.
Get small and put yourself in the envelope, Steve. We'll be doing old Steve Martin references for the remainder of the hour.
So excuse us.
Well, we're just four wild and crazy guys. Yeah, no, I was going to say about when you're talking about the Western versus Eastern takes on human behavior and all that sort of accountability. I was going to say, probably lost the joke now, because I was going to say, boy, it's ironic that we're talking about this on Black Friday, when nobody shows any restraint whatsoever, when they're in the stores, but...
It's a weird day all around, right?
Yeah, it has no meaning to me at all, Black Friday. I don't go shopping. I don't.
Nor should it.
Okay.
I apparently I get a lot of extra emails on Black Friday. That's how I celebrate Black Friday.
Yeah. Well,
by finding out
and try to keep that spirit in your heart all year long.
Finding out the John Fluvog shoes have some stuff cheap.
The deeper spiritual meaning of quality footwear.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess was there ever any funny, awful moment on stage from being high, or was there a ton of them? I don't know. I mean,
on stage, no. I was fine on stage high. No, the horrible moments for me from being high were in life. In the late 80s, early 90s, I did a lot of cocaine as well. I was never addicted to cocaine, but I was overusing it, and
you just like the way it smelled.
I was spending time with people I didn't particularly like because they had cocaine. And I was at the outer edge of the Sam Kinison entourage for a while. I would go to his house up in the hills late at night, and there would be a party, and I would argue politics with him because he was ultimately a right-wing rebel. He was evangelical Christian in his heart, and as a result, he was homophobic, and he was misogynist, and he was all the horrible things that I associate with conservatism.
I was going to say, that's a shock. None of that came out in his material.
A greater actor than anyone was given credit for.
And
he was such a sensitive person.
And at one point, I had a gig on the East Coast right around the holidays in New Jersey. And he was booked in a New York City nightclub for New Year's Eve. And I was doing blow with him, and I said, I'll stick around on the East Coast for a week, and I'll come to we'll hang out. And he said, okay. And because I was on cocaine and overvaluing a relationship and overvaluing everything I heard and lying to myself, I took his okay as, yeah, that'll be great, let's hang out. Yeah. So I did this gig in New Jersey, and then spent every penny I had made at that gig staying in New York for an extra week, and then went to see him at whatever this damn club was. And I got to the back door, and the bouncers said, what do you want? And I said, I'm going up to hang out with Sam Kinison. And he said, what's your name? And they went in, and they came back, and they said, oh, yeah. He said, hi, and they gave me a ticket. And I was not brought into the back to hang out with him and Carl LeBove and Alan Stephen. Instead, I was given a ticket to go sit out in the club and watch him go down in flames because it was a New Year's Eve performance and they're never good. And it was heartbreaking to me. It was embarrassing and expensive and disillusioning. And it was disillusioning in an odd way because it was this entirely self-manufactured illusion about a relationship that didn't exist and a friendship that wasn't and a place in the comedy world that I did not yet hold.
Yeah. Would you say that was like a rock bottom moment as far as at least
it
cocaine?
was pretty damn close. It was certainly around the time that I went, yeah, I got to stop doing this drug. This is not working for me.
Did you have a rock bottom moment with pot?
Probably had many. I stole from my girlfriend